Welcome to the world according to Rowan Dean.
Good evening and welcome to the world according to Rowan Dean, a world in which Australia is already a monoculture. And what do I mean by that? I'll tell you in a tick. We've got a huge show coming up this evening, including more deeply disturbing revelations, especially for women, about how we were lied to during COVID. Plus, what if you throw a multi-million-dollar party in Fiji to save the world, but nobody bothers to turn up? And what did Trump and Albo talk about on their phone call this morning? Melons? I hope not. But first, yesterday I caught the ferry into town in Sydney and it was a beautiful day, the water sparkling on the harbour, the sun shining, the tourists taking photos of the Opera House and a bunch of Aussie school kids having the time of their lives on some school excursion day out. It reminded me vividly of my own school excursion as a kid from Forest Primary School in Canberra up to Luna Park. But then my blood ran cold listening to these kids bantering about doing this or that unpleasantness to Pauline. This wasn't some harmless school excursion. This was something deeply unpleasant and deeply worrying that was going on the ferry. These kids were off on a political march against the government's opposition. This was the Australian equivalent of a day out during Mao's Cultural Revolution. A pleasant river cruise for the kiddies of the Khmer Rouge in the year zero. These innocent Aussie school kids are disgustingly and disgracefully being brainwashed into the sinister, dangerous and deadly ideology of the modern socialist left. The pale blue and greys of the typical Aussie school kid's uniform was yesterday, to all intents and purposes, nothing more than a political uniform every bit as threatening in my mind, as malign and as dangerous as the one worn in this scene from the movie Cabaret. Taking the innocence and optimism of youth, that yearning desire to make the world a wonderful place, and twisting it into hatred of individuals like Pauline, and corrupting it with lies and propaganda for specific party political ends, which is precisely what occurred yesterday throughout Australia, is an absolute perversion of Australian democracy and should have been labelled as such by every political leader. This is the opposite of democracy. This is fascism and communism to the core.
Similar sentiment to where Kaiser is in prison. Sorry. Give it back! 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 Let go! She saw my microphone, it's in her bag.
Those are the young voters of the future, not thinking for themselves, but being brainwashed with left-wing political hatreds. We've had the debate over the past few weeks about a monoculture versus a multicultural Australia. There's been an awful lot of nonsense spouted, especially from some Conservatives, such as James Paterson and even John Howard, who have suggested that Pauline Hanson wants to impose some ugly, top-down, government-mandated monoculture, whereby the cultural settings are set by the government bureaucrats, then relayed through a compliant media to the masses, and heaven forbid anyone raising a dissenting voice. Earlier today, Penny Wong made a speech attacking the idea of a monoculture in Australia. But then it hit me. Watching those school kids on the ferry, Penny, that's exactly what we already have. We live in an Australian left-wing monoculture. Australia in 2026, more than ever before in our history, is a monoculture, a very ugly monoculture at that. All our cultural settings are mandated by the government, regurgitated through the mainstream media. Corporate Australia laps it up and spews it out. And then that bastion of Australia's socialist monoculture, the ABC, pumps it like raw sewerage every day straight into our schools and even into our kindergartens. It is the ugly Australian monoculture of the left. And when I say ugly, I mean it. Ugly is the perfect acronym for the modern Australian monoculture. UGLY. U is for unions, G is for Greens, L is for Labor, and the Y stands for what Celeste Patterson called the yachts, the cultural elites, the art galleries, the exhibitions, the biennales, the literary festivals, the yachts. And sitting above them all, the bastion of our socialist monoculture, where there is literally not a single conservative voice to be heard, is the ABC. Let me give you a few examples of this UGLY monoculture that is mandated by the government and preached without question or dissent throughout mainstream Australian media and cultural circles and education. Many of these monocultural tenets come with their own monocultural slogans, often repeated with quasi-religious fervour. Tenet number 1, Aboriginal Australians, or even a tiny hint of Aboriginal heritage, gives you a unique and very special and powerful position, a privileged position in the monocultural hierarchy. Always was, always will be.
The land was stolen, sovereignty was never ceded. It always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And I also want to acknowledge all the sister girls and brother boys who have made such an extraordinary contribution to Sydney's queer community who are here today.
Tenet number 2, a sexual idiosyncrasy outside traditional heterosexuality places you on a higher moral plateau than other Australians. In the socialist monoculture, love is love.
Well, I think we have to be sensible about these things. I mean, we have men and women, we have other people.
Men and women and other people. And that clown is in the Liberal Party, who themselves in government have pandered to the socialist monoculture year after year. Tenet number 3, to the monoculture, the history of Australia is one of endless shameful oppression of minorities and greedy exploitation of resources. Tenet number 4, the monoculture firmly believes, despite all evidence to the contrary, that the planet is boiling, and it is the Australian monoculture's sole purpose and responsibility to deindustrialise ourselves in order to save mankind. This is the highest and purest of moral pursuits. There is no planet B. Climate change is the greatest moral challenge of our times. Tenet number 5. In the eyes of the UGLY left-wing monoculture, Palestinians are noble freedom fighters, and Jews or Israelis or Zios or whatever else you want to call them, they're the baddies. Without exception, from the river to the sea, globalise the intifada.
I'm a political refugee from Iran. I've been to prison, I've been under Islamic law, and I know how it starts and I know how it ends. And it always starts with the, for some reason, unity of left and Islamists, and it scares me. Guys for Gaza! Globalize the intifada! Guys for Gaza! Globalize the intifada!
Tenet number 6, if you don't subscribe to the new Australian monoculture, you will be ostracised, you will be sneered at, you will be mocked, ridiculed, spat at, vilified and hated to the point where it's okay within the monoculture to publicly fantasise about sodomising and murdering you with a stick. Where conservative women like Gina Reinhardt or Pauline Hanson are demonised with approval from the cultural elites. This is the modern Australian monoculture. Hardcore left-wing, anti-colonial heritage, anti-tradition, anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-white, anti-straight, anti-enterprise, anti-aspiration. A nihilistic monoculture that takes pride in any and every flag other than its own. That has gripped Australia and has held it in a vice-like grip. The left, the unions, the Greens, Labor and the arts. Which is why not a single person at the ABC Or it would appear any of our institutions ever dare stray outside the sacred beliefs and tenets of the great Aussie socialist monoculture. The great irony of the monoculture debate is that when people disparage the idea of a monoculture, they are normally referring to the Aussie stereotypes of the 70s, like this. But at least in that monoculture, you could speak your mind. You could think for yourself. You could argue and debate ideas without it becoming savage and bitter and personal. In that monoculture, you could say what you thought. No longer, alas. You don't like the idea of a government-mandated Australian monoculture? Nor do I. But too bad, because we're already living in it. Give me back the old-fashioned one any day of the week. Well, you know I always love a good advert, a good commercial, a good TV commercial. Well, I saw this one this week and it's absolutely brilliant. Have a look.
Victoria's tsunami of debt, waste, corruption and overspending is $229 billion and rising. It's destroying businesses, jobs, stealing resources from our schools, hospitals and police. Without a plan to clean up and pay back the debt, it will smash all we've built. And who'll have to pay? Our children. Join us to fix Victoria.
Superb. That was the first TV ad from Fix Victoria Inc., which aired earlier this week, talking about Victoria's existential debt burden. Joining me now is Head of Advocacy at Fix Victoria, and someone you'll recognise from this show from several years ago, Gideon Rosner. Gideon, great to see you. Now, you're the spokesperson.
Wonderful to be back, Rowan.
It's good to have you back, Gideon. Now, tell us, what is Fix Victoria? Who's behind it? What's your role? Great advert, like I've just said. What's the plan?
Thank you. Well, look, Fix Victoria was set up by a group of like-minded Victorians who are absolutely despairing over the way the state is being run and what is happening in Victoria, and want to do something about it and want to be a voice for other Victorians who want to do something about it. Because let's face it, Rowan, Victoria is in serious trouble. We're going broke. We're being overrun by crime. We are having billions of dollars of public money siphoned off by organised crime and all sorts of other nefarious characters. When you put it that way, these are actually the indicia of a third world country, of a failed state. And that's not good enough, because I've lived in Melbourne my whole life. I remember when it was a great city, when Victoria was a great place to live. Yeah, it was always a little bit trendy, a little bit woke and all sorts of other things, but underneath it all, it was a really, really great place to live. I've become involved because I want to help turn things around, and I want to help be a voice for the thousands of everyday Victorians who also want it turned around. And I must say, anybody watching who wants to help with the war effort, please head to fixvictoria.com.au and sign up. We need all the help and support we can get.
So the ad's been running for a week, Gideon. So what sort of response have you had so far?
We have been absolutely blown away by the response that we've seen to the ad. I mean, the comments on social media, in fact, it's been viewed over 500,000 times last time I checked on social media. Our website has completely melted down. We've had people subscribe, thousands of people subscribing for updates, but importantly also, most importantly, we've had hundreds of Victorians who are now proud and paid up members of Fix Victoria, people who feel like we speak for them, who are articulating the issues that they care about. And really, we are a voice for everybody, Rowan. No matter what political party you've supported in the past, no matter where you come from, no matter what your views are on certain issues, if you share our passion for fixing the state and getting it on the right track, we're for you.
So give us some of the indications of what needs to be done. You've mentioned that you're across party politics. You want people from all sides of politics to join. So what are the specific things that you're looking to achieve in, say, the coming 6 months or so?
Well, look, for the moment, really what we're trying to do is amplify the issues that matter and start a fair dinkum debate on things like debt, on crime, on corruption. Again, Rowan, I make the point, we are facing serious issues in Victoria. I just saw on your grab before, we're paying $24 million a day in interest on our state debt. That's not to actually pay the debt off. That's just the interest to service the debt. That's $1 million every hour spent before we can spend money on ambulances or hospitals or roads or things like that. We're seeing crime, 473,000 criminal incidents last year. That is the highest number since records began. And of course, we're seeing massive spending sprees and boondoggles on things like the East-West Tunnel and the suburban rail loop and all sorts of other boondoggle projects that are actually not only costing us a lot of money, but sucking labour and resources out of private builders and private housing and things like that. So we have some serious problems. But the good news is, Rowan, that Victoria is broken, but it is not broken beyond repair. There is nothing that has been done to the state of Victoria over the past few years that can't be undone with the right policies and the right leadership and the right decisions. So we're here to be another voice in the debate, because don't forget, Rowan, that there are plenty of other voices in the debate who are arguing for the status quo. In effect, there are groups like unions and not-for-profits and all manner of other, carpetbagger interest groups who want more debt and more taxes. So really, we're an important player in the debate because we're standing up for the everyday Victorians who are sick of it and want their voices to be counted too.
Now, you mentioned an acronym of ABM, Anywhere But Melbourne, as a depressing reality for business people or certain investors. Melbourne really came to the world's attention during COVID. That was when really the world noticed noticed Melbourne, and it was not in a good way, sadly. With the revelations of Fauci's diary this week, how does that make you feel? You were one of those voices who bravely stood up on this show and elsewhere against the authoritarian madness that blighted Melbourne in those days. How does it make you feel now being basically vindicated every day with different bits of news that come out? You were a voice pretty much in the wilderness in Melbourne back then. How does that make you feel?
Look, I'd love to say I feel great about it, but I don't, because I was proven right beyond my wildest expectations, and it was even worse than I thought it would be when, the IPA, my previous employer, was one of the few, the first voice in Australia to say no to lockdowns, as you famously remember. But the truth of the matter is, Rowan, we still haven't recovered. And what the Fauci saga shows to us is that we were lied to. It's more evidence we were lied to, and that happened in Victoria. We were lied to that all these lockdowns and other stupid rules we put up with were necessary and effective. We were lied to that we were all in this together. Remember that one? And we were lied to that we'd just be able to go into this 2-year deep freeze and everything would be hunky-dory when we came out of lockdowns. We have still not recovered. Rowan, I lived on Spencer Street here in the CBD of Melbourne when that all happened, and I saw the soul of a city get ripped out in real time. We are still coping with, firstly, the cost of these things, but also, Rowan, there's a gentleman who a lot of your viewers may recognise, may not be too popular with a lot of your viewers, but his name's Kos Samaras. I quite like him. But whatever you think of Kos, he's made a really, really important point, which is there's something to be said for delayed trauma, a very well-known and well-recognised psychological reaction. What happens after deep trauma is, in a lot of cases, you go very numb, you sort of go through the motions, and only years after the fact does anger start to bubble to the surface. Well, that's what we're seeing now in Victoria, because Corona, to me, was the tipping point in this state. That was the point at which it all went wrong. That was when we lost our pride. It's when we lost our mojo. It's when we started becoming the butt of the national joke. I often say, I remember when Victoria was the envy of this state, not a national punchline like it is right now. The longest lockdown in the world, the crazy rules we had to live over, the interminable press conferences and all this propaganda and rubbish that went on. Other people sat up and took notice, and it really did, we hear a lot about long COVID in terms of the medical symptoms, but I think Victoria is still in a spiritual and psychological long COVID. And really, we need to have some serious action and some serious momentum and some serious decisions to turn things around and make us the state that we once were, because we can get there. We can.
Well, Gideon, I speak for many viewers of this show and this network. If anyone can fix it, you can, and the people behind you. Great work there, Gideon Rosner. Fix Victoria.
Thanks,
we all
man.
agree with that. And now it's time for The World's Gone Mad. Yes, it truly is a world gone mad when we now learn that yet another one of those crazy COVID conspiracy theories turns out to be true. Yes, remember how, despite people like myself, suggesting that both logically and historically the claim that vaccines could prevent transmission was a nonsense, the media and the politicians savaged us and told us the complete opposite, like this ghastly woman on CNN.
It means instead of the virus being able to hop from person to person to person to person, spreading and spreading, sickening some of them, but not all of them. And the ones that it doesn't sicken don't know they have it, and then they give it to even more people because they didn't recognize they were, right? Instead of the virus being able to hop from person to person to person, potentially mutating and becoming more virulent and drug-resistant along the way, now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. That means the vaccines will get us to the end of this.
Stop. What a lunatic. And she was completely wrong. Or how about this depraved despot, Victorian Premier Dan Andrews?
I'm not going to say to someone, oh, look, just wait us out, will you? Just wait 4 or 5 weeks and then you'll be able to go to the pub. No. If you make the judgment to not get vaccinated and you reckon you can wait out us or the publican or whoever you want to think you're waiting out, you won't wait out the virus because the virus will be here for a long time and your only protection against it is being vaccinated. This will be well into 2022, well and truly into 2022. Then we're going to get into booster issues, so it won't be your first and second dose, it'll be have you had your third. And then the other issue will be, well, who knows what variant's coming.
What a complete repellent individual. Of course, that idiocy came after all the rubbish about masks and social distancing, which we now know to have been ineffectual and unnecessary, as many of us warned at the time. Now we are learning that perhaps the reason for all of that was simply to stop us developing natural immunity before the vaccines were made available, as Jeffrey Tucker explains.
For me, I still can't get over the fact that I was told by top FDA, NIH officials that a major reason for social distancing, lockdowns, masking, plexiglass, stay-at-home orders, and everything else was to delay the onset of natural immunity.
To delay the onset of natural immunity. But all of that insanity pales into insignificance compared to the latest revelation of a conspiracy theory that turned out to be a fact. Again, there were many individuals, such as, again, myself and many others, who were so conspiratorial that we dared to suggest that perhaps it wasn't such a great idea to be jabbing an experimental and untested gene therapy into the arms of pregnant young women. We were told, oh, no, you're a conspiracy theorist. But yet again, it seems we conspiracy theorists were in fact correct. This week came the news that, quote, devastating stories of women suffering miscarriages during the pandemic have emerged. After it was revealed, Dr. Anthony Fauci privately speculated about risks associated with the COVID vaccine during pregnancy. End of quote. The report continues, quote, the former head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, that's Fauci, worried that the second shot theoretically could be associated with miscarriage in the first trimester. His texts from 2021, which were released on Monday last week, now show us. The texts in questions are between Anthony Fauci and his right-hand woman, then head of the CDC, Rochelle Walensky, I remember her from back during the pandemic, an email exchange in January 2021, right near the beginning of the vaccination rollouts. Between the two of them says, and I quote, Fauci, another issue you need to be aware of, since many people have significant cytokine storms after the second dose, this theoretically could be associated with miscarriage in the first trimester. That was Fauci's text, to which Walensky responded, definitely a good point. Yet disgustingly, both Dr. Fauci and Walensky still, after that, took to the airwaves to reassure pregnant women of the safety of the vaccines.
approximately 20,000 pregnant women have been vaccinated with no red flags, as we say, and this is being monitored by the CDC and the FDA.
Is it safe to get vaccinated while you're breastfeeding?
It absolutely is safe to get vaccinated. So I would say if you are thinking about getting vaccinated, there is no bad time to get vaccinated. Get vaccinated while you're thinking about having a baby, before you're thinking about having a baby, while you're pregnant with your baby, or after you've delivered your baby.
Yet, according to the text exchange, they knew what they were saying was not always true. Doubts had indeed been raised. They knew, and yet they went on the airwaves and they told a different story.
Just 1 month before he declared a very different story.
So hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman devastated, reacting, quote, Neary and I had 7 miscarriages trying to have a second child during COVID, and then time ran out. What was he thinking?
Yes, how many women had miscarriages during that time? How many miscarriages could have been avoided? Around the world, how many lives ruined? There are people in America now insisting that Fauci and others involved in the COVID lies be tried for mass murder. In some states, that would mean life imprisonment if found guilty. In other states, they would face the death penalty. Yes, that's what happens when the world really, really gets mad. Coming up, what on earth did Donald Trump talk to Albo about on their late-night phone call? I hate to think. That and the socialists determined to take over America in a tick. Joining me now is former US Senate Chief of Staff, now Executive Director of the Coalition for Affordability and Prosperity. Sounds good to me. Chuck Flint. Chuck, great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. Now, an old video has emerged from 2020 of New York's socialist mayor Zoran Mamdani, that's the kind of crazy Islamist socialist character in my opinion, admitting that he is fooling white liberals, meaning white lefties. Have a listen.
White communities, they've had representation forever. And so for them, their tie is a little less identity and a little more ideology. And so what I mean by that is we have a lot of voters here who think of themselves first as progressive voters. And so we reach out to them speaking about our platform, our progressive platform. And you're very right that you need someone in the middle to be a validator, someone to tell them to trust us, believe in us.
So there he was, asking, saying that they needed a validator. His accent seems slightly more foreign than it is these days. Chuck, what do you make of Mamdani? Is he the real deal, or is he some kind of fraudster or a validator?
I'm not really sure what to make of him yet, except that his policies aren't really working. But the rest of there's another part of that video that's really interesting where he talks about how they haven't had any representation in minority communities. And my first thought was, what about Barack Obama?
Yes.
I mean, you had an African-American elected president in 2008. And Mamdani, what I can just kind of offer about him, a window into his thinking after watching this video, he's very focused on identity. And you see it in his politics. It's all about class warfare. He has bad relationships with the Jewish community. He just doxed almost 1 million New Yorkers that own second homes that are wealthy, putting their addresses and their names out there for the public to see. He left Little Italy off of a map, a tourist map, and it's a historical area. So we've seen this consistently through whatever he's doing.
And he also seems to play around with accents like Kamala Harris, AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. They all seem to tailor their accent to the crowd. I mean, maybe that's unfair, I don't know. But we've also seen characters like the Democrat Francesca Hong say all kinds of mad things, like she's been complaining about her son being half white. Have a listen.
I did marry my proximity to whiteness continues, right? My son is biracial. He's half white and half Korean. And I think navigating, what his identity is and how people perceive him is always at the back of my mind as well.
So, Chuck, what is this obsession with race that just permeates every Democrat, every left-winger?
I think it's part of a divide and conquer type of strategy. That's what this is really all about. The Democratic Socialists are all trying to convince you that it's a rigged system. And AOC, Memdani, Hong, El Said, they are having a hard time doing it because they are actually people of privilege, according to what they lay out. If the system is rigged, how have they been able to achieve so much success? They're all college educated. And in the case of El Said in Michigan, he's a Rhodes Scholar. So, the rhetoric does not match the reality here. And, Hong wanted to cancel Christmas. They want to abolish ICE, abolish the Senate. They want to deconstruct American society. But in order to do that and accomplish their goals, they need to have class warfare, which is what they want. And
Chuck, it does seem, impossible not to draw strong conclusions with the Russian Revolution, for example, where it was the very privileged elite lefties who lorded it over the masses. Is that an unfair comparison with the Democrat socialists?
It's not at all. And actually, I'm reading a book right now by Max Eastman. It's called Reflections on the Failure of Socialism. And he talks about joining the Bolsheviks after they had taken power in the 1920s. He was a committed socialist, believed strongly in these ideas. This book was written in 1955, and it lays out why socialism will just ultimately fail. And it talks a lot about the types of people that it draws in, and he refers to them as soft-minded liberals that accept these policies that are really just pie in the sky type of ideas. We can see it in a lot of what they've talked about in terms of their policies. Universal child care, we're going to have Medicare for all. El Said can't even answer how he would fund that. They're just not realistic.
Well, talking about socialist madness, Chuck, our very own Prime Minister Anthony Albanese reportedly had a phone call with Donald Trump in the early hours earlier this morning. What on earth do you think they chatted about, Chuck?
Well, I'd venture to guess that tariffs were one of the things that they talked about. I heard a little bit about it, and I know that Australia obviously wants some tariff relief. We've got flat 12.5% tariffs on Australia right now. So that was part of the call. And then AUKUS was another part of the call. Obviously, China is still a big threat, not only for Australia, but for the U.S. They're our biggest geopolitical threat that we face. And so the AUKUS defense pact with the U.S., the U.K., and Australia is very important. And that was brought up as well.
And where, in your mind, does Australia sit in Donald Trump's hierarchy of friends and foes? We are a left-wing country under this Albanese government, but Trump seemed to get on very well with Albanese in the White House. But we recognised Palestine, for example, which was a disgrace. We do have very strong socialist tendencies in this government. Do you think Trump views us as kind of, he'd prefer a change of government, or does he just think, well, those crazy Aussies?
No, I think Donald Trump is very pragmatic, and he understands the importance of Australia as an ally, especially when it comes to geopolitics and the issue with China, as I've already alluded to. Australia is critical. The country's been a great ally in the past. The politics have drifted left, but that doesn't change the fact that Australia is a very important ally and a very important country in this world.
Fantastic. Chuck Flint, great to chat to you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And now it's time for our weekly dose of climate doomsdayism. Weather or not? Yes, prospective purchasers of Chinese-built electric vehicles who are keen to follow Chris Bowen's advice and help save the planet from catastrophic global heating must ask themselves whether or not they are entirely comfortable with their choice after this footage of a Zeekr 7X mysteriously and spontaneously catching on fire at a charging station went viral this week. Oh, dear. According to Zika, that particular car had been previously involved in a serious collision and had not been serviced or repaired properly. Not sure if that should be reassuring or not. Meanwhile, speaking of Mr. Bowen, lovers of Australia's spectacular oceans were delighted to learn this week that in spite of Mr. Bowen's finest efforts, or should that be because of Mr. Bowen's finest efforts, not a single one of these sort of offshore wind monstrosities has been erected in the Albanese government's 6 priority areas after 4 years of Mr. Bowen's relentless climate cult campaign. Phew! Still, speaking at last week's National Press Club, Mr. Bowen had a handy explanation for this failure to meet his own targets.
While neither hydrogen or offshore wind play a role in our 82% target, the cost curve for both hasn't come down as quickly as was predicted a few years ago.
Ah, yes, of course. Thanks, Chris, for the explanation. Still, at least the surfers, fishermen, kayakers, dolphins, whales, lobsters and octopi can breathe a little easier under the waves. Meanwhile, speaking of life under the sea, a new study reveals the Great Barrier Reef is thriving, according to the climate skeptic website Electroverse.
A new study reveals the Great Barrier Reef is thriving. Evaluating 38 years of data from the Australian Institute of Marine Science, coral cover is now at its highest level since monitoring began. Published in the International Journal of Global Warming, the paper reads, "There is no consistent correlation between rising temperatures and reduced coral cover, with most corals demonstrating rapid recovery. The findings directly contradict the narrative of irreversible decline. Bleaching is merely cyclical and, crucially, recoverable. The Great Barrier Reef is thriving, and the data prove it."
As Peter Ridd always told us. Meanwhile, to compound Chris Bowen's record of repeated failures, a bevy of world leaders have all said, no thanks, I'm busy that day, to His Excellency President Bowen's invitation to an all-expenses-paid junket in Fiji to prepare for the bigger COP31 junket in Turkey.
7 News can reveal tonight a global climate summit held in Fiji will be paid for by Australian taxpayers. Our government has agreed to foot the entire bill, coughing up tens of millions of dollars, and it seems major world leaders probably won't even turn up.
Clearly, those major world leaders have better things to do than to pander to Mr. Bowen's ridiculous pomposity, self-entitlement and out-of-control ego. But it gets even better. Obviously, with Mr. Bowen as its president, His Excellency, we can expect COP31 to be a massive anticlimax, a massive failure. But the good news for Chris is it can't be any bigger a no-show than the potential COP33 in India in 2 years' time because, as we learnt this week, the Indian government has withdrawn its bid to host the entire event. Ooh, wonder why that would be. Looks like even the Indians have realised the wheels are coming off the whole climate renewables bandwagon. Or, as we used to say back in the good old days of the Raj, I dare say, old chap, climate, schmimate. Coming up, the very latest madness from Albanese's melons juggling saga. In a tick. Well, joining me now is former Labor MP Michael Danby and Liberal Senator Leah Bly. Great to see you both. Now, I'm sorry, I've got to get straight into Melongate, straight into juggling those melons. And let's look at this clip of the various Labor women. And I actually, on a serious note, I find this really, really disgraceful. How many Labor women have come out and defended the Prime Minister when we all know, of course, it would have been completely the other way around if it had been Tony Abbott or anyone else. Have a look.
I completely disagree with that interpretation. It is 100% wrong.
The Liberals have absolutely lost the plot, trying to perpetuate this ridiculous thing.
The Prime Minister's been very clear. There has been some significant mischaracterisation.
Leah Bly, how do those women look themselves in the mirror? We've had 30 years of be respectful to women, don't crass crude jokes, don't make crude jokes. We've had Julia Gillard, we've had Tony Abbott, the blue tie, looking at the watch. We've had Scott Morrison, Brittany Higgins, and all of them, these Labor women sit there and defend the most crass, smutty, pathetic, juvenile, schoolboy behaviour from the Prime Minister, Leah.
It is extraordinary, and the hypocrisy of those Labor women is just, it beggars belief. And you don't even include in that, sitting in the Senate chamber this week, you also had Senator Penny Wong and Katie Gallagher also doubling down and backing in the Prime Minister's pretty disgraceful actions. And I think, you know, people make missteps, and this is a very, very gross misstep of the Prime Minister here. And all he had to do was own up to it and say, it's a crass joke. I shouldn't have done it. It's in bad taste. But instead, he's doubled down and then sent out the Labor women to try and defend what is pretty disgusting behaviour by the Prime Minister, and certainly very insulting to our friends in Japan.
Well, Michael, I would argue that not a single one of those women, and I would include many, many other women. Where are all the ABC women, the journalists? We've had one journalist saying, oh, it was just a kind of daggy thing that he said. Where are all those women who won't come out and say a word? We never want to hear another word from these women ever again attacking men or boys or males for inappropriate behaviour. I never want to hear another word, Michael. We've had it for 30 years from these women preaching at us and lording it over us and telling us how bad all our behaviour is. I never want to hear another word from them. They are hypocrites. It's a two-tier morality system, Michael.
Rowan, the mean girls in the Senate, Katie Gallagher and Penny Wong, are leading ministers in the Australian government, and they've revealed themselves as grim socialist left ideologues, unprincipled, unethical. They claim to be feminists, but when the boot is on the other side, they say nothing. If you are going to be consistent and condemn sexism or misogyny on the Liberal side, then you need to call it out when it happens on your side too. Now we've got a Prime Minister, Benny Hill, who people making memes about carry on elbow with a cast of sort of so-called feminist politicians. It disgraces Australia. It makes us small in the eyes of an important country like Japan, an ally of this country.
Absolutely. And what about all those schoolboys who have been shouted at by teachers and told off for their behaviour and all the rest of it? I mean, it's how can they not just say, well, look at the Prime Minister. He was telling gags like that. Anyway, I want to ask you about, Leah, I want to ask you about a colleague of yours, Senator Andrew Bragg, who gave a speech recently saying that permanent immigration should be cut to around 180,000. Angus Taylor hit back at him saying, well, you know, stay in your lane. Where are the coalition on immigration? Matt Canavan has said very clearly, and I agree with him, backpackers and so on are necessary out in the bush. They're necessary there to do a job. That's not who the target is. The target audience is, in my opinion, people from countries who have values very separate to ours, and we know which countries those are. Where do you sit on this immigration debate, Leah Bly?
To show you how complicated it is, and I think the coalition's been very clear that immigration will certainly be in line with our housing supply. In terms of where we sit and where we cut, I think that's definitely before we get to a number. We've also got to look at things like the number of international students coming in, the number of people that come in with spousal visas, and it's not just giving one person a visa, but then they might bring their whole families in. It's about looking at the skilled workforce that we need in Australia. We've got a housing shortage, so it makes sense that we would have bricklayers perhaps on that skilled migration list. So I think there's still a bit of work to be done in this policy area, and Senator John O'Donoghue is doing a great job at making sure that we're going to get the policy position on this right. But I think it does go to show it is very complicated, and it's not just as simple as saying we're going to cut out this whole group, because we do need different workforces to do different things in Australia, and we certainly don't want to be leaving any industries short or not being able to complete their work, whether it's fruit picking, whether it's chefs in kitchens, in pubs, serving behind a bar. We've got to make sure that we are doing what we do in the national interest and we can keep Australia's economy going.
Michael, I want to ask you about the Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism. And you've spoken during the week very, very brilliantly and passionately about it. I just wanted to your thoughts at the end of the week, where we are. I mean, are expectations just way too high for this Royal Commission? Was it a mistake to go in to try and tackle such a big job in such a kind of small-minded, bureaucratic fashion? What's the danger, Michael, if this all comes out and doesn't really hit the nail on the head? What's your thoughts where we are now, as I guess we're reaching the end?
So Humphrey, yes, Prime Minister, said, never hold an inquiry unless you know the result. So Albo wanted to have this terminated a year before the federal election. That's one thing about the timing. Number two, the Royal Commissioner's constrained by not inviting leading politicians. Albo should be invited about why he hasn't called a summit of Muslim leaders. Wong should be asked to correlate all of her anti-Israel statements with the upsurges in anti-Semitism, and Tony Burke should be asked why he didn't listen to the advice of the Director General of ASIO in August 2025 when he said there was going to be a massive upsurge in terrorism and he needed more resources. Now, that's what a Royal Commissioner should do. I mean, if Frydenberg wants to go along, I'm happy to go along too, and Mike Kelly and Dave Sharma. We might actually have practical policy suggestions for the Royal Commissioner, but she doesn't want that. It's not because she's an evil person. It's because this is the way it was framed in order to achieve what's going to be pretty much a non-result. It's good to give people the opportunity to vent about what's happened to them in the previous 3 years, but that's insufficient for the well-being of Australia. We don't want another Bondi happening again.
And Leah, just very, very quickly, were you pleased to see Albo chatting to the President Trump this morning?
It's funny that he has to go out and tell everyone that he's talking to the American Prime Minister. I think Albo is certainly busy trying to make sure that we're staying friends. When he's insulting the Japanese Prime Minister in the way that he has, I think I worry when we have our Prime Ministers speaking to other foreign leaders in terms of how he's damaging that relationship that Australia has with them. So let's hope they didn't talk about melons.
Well, with his loose and fast ways, I hope the Prime Minister, it would have been late at night, I hope he was on form. Anyway, I guess we'll know. Any distraction from Melongate, I guess the Prime Minister is looking for. Leah Bly, Michael Danby, thanks so much for coming on the show, and we'll chat again soon. Coming up, Sarah Hanson-Young discovers a canine cover-up. Talk about dog whistling in a tick. I'm always on the lookout for the latest example of extreme, chronic, rampant Trump derangement syndrome, particularly amongst our politicians. So how on earth could I go past this one? Just to refresh our memory, a couple of weeks ago, debating immigration, Pauline Hanson made the uncontroversial and vaguely amusing comment that what this country does not need is more Uber drivers, nail polishers and dog walkers. In other words, unskilled labour. There is no shortage of any of the above in our major cities. Now, there is a debate within the coalition about semi-unskilled labour, such as fruit pickers being critical in our agricultural sector and so on, which is a different debate. There is also a debate to be had about people coming in from countries where Jew hatred and Islamism are rife. That's, in my opinion, the more significant debate. But, naturally, Senator Hanson-Young, the lass who thought Sea Patrol was a factual program, not fiction, this week got all hot and bothered about Pauline Hanson's remark and threw in a massive dollop of TDS.
I'm particularly concerned about the phrase and the attack on people as dog walkers. I mean, this is almost... this is a Trumpism from Pauline Hanson. And she's talking about dog walkers today. Tomorrow she's going to be saying they're eating the dogs. It is a disgusting attack on those who come to Australia to make a life, to contribute to our community and to build their families. And where is the call out of this lie? Because, of course, there is no visa category for dog walkers in Australia.
The dog walkers are eating the dogs. It's no visa. Unbelievable. Talk about missing the point. But anyway, thank you, Sarah Hanson-Young, for giving me the opportunity to once again play my favourite ever. And there are so many to choose from. Donald Trump's greatest hit. Take it away. Eating the dogs, I'll see you Sunday morning for a must-watch Outsiders. But now it's opinionated with Danica DiGiorgio. They're eating the cats.